What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Welcome to another episode of Three for the Money. Okay, back at it again with my main man Stuckey from the Action Network. You can find him on subscribe to his podcast, Big Bets on Campus. You can find him on the Action Network podcast. You can find him on the YouTube streets, bullshitting about betting because that's what he does. And he's a man deep in it and knows his shit. And he told me a pretty interesting stat about a team that somehow he's still loyal to. I was very loyal to them about halfway through the season, but I had to jump off. Your Titans stat was pretty interesting because you watch them, you go, they're not terrible. I mean, they're going to end up with a top 2 or 3 or 4 pick, but they have been more competitive than some of these other teams. Like they're better right now than this version of the Dallas Cowboys, or they're better than the Tua-less Dolphins, who are obviously two separate teams. But we have seen some awful teams. I don't quite put the Titans there. Their quarterback plays bad, but they don't win, and they also don't do something else.
Yeah, the Titans are 1-9 against the spread. They don't cover. That is a rarity in the NFL.
And they haven't
Brutal.
been a favorite in any game, right?
They were favored against the Patriots. They should have covered that game. I think they closed -3.5, and the Patriots scored on the last play of the game to force overtime. Then they won by 3. I had them in that game, -3.5. So yeah, they're 1-9 against the spread. That rarely happens. NFL, pretty efficient market. Like we're talking about against the closing line too. Um, and the only other team to do that over the past 30 years to be that bad against the number through 11 weeks is the 2007 Ravens. I remember them well as the Kyle Bowler Ravens last year of Brian Billick. They went 5-11. It was a bad team. That was the year before Harbaugh and Flacco ended up coming to town. So yeah, they rarely cover. I've been burned by them a bunch. They get so unlucky in how they don't cover too. I mean, this is going all the way back to I had them week 1 against the Bears catching 4.5, and they were up 17-0, and the Bears covered without scoring an offensive touchdown. They had a punt blocked. They had Will Levis with a asinine throw. I mean, like they found ways. Last week,
I had him in that game as well as the Jags money line against the Dolphins. That was a rough start to the 2024 season.
that was one of the worst NFL beats I've ever had in my life. To not only lose that game outright, to not cover 4.5 was insane. They've just found ways to not cover. They've been pretty on like their special teams have cost them a bunch of
In fairness
games.
to the Titans, that week 1 game would be like you going on date 1 with the girl and she's like, I'm also a stripper. Like they told you who they were,
Yeah,
and they
that's
have pretty
fair.
consistently kind of rode that out. It's not like that was an anomaly game in this 1-9 experience. I mean, I think that game kind of sums up their season, doesn't it?
Yeah, but they've also had things like out of their control that have cost them. And so I bet them this week +8.5 against the Texans.
You're
Short week for
sick.
the
Sick.
Texans. I think it'll be a really low scoring game. These are two slow paced teams. The Titans defense is still good. They're playing really well. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look the past 2 weeks, they, from a yards per play perspective, they outplayed the Vikings and the Chargers. They outgained both, held them to under 5 yards per play. Not many people probably saw the game last week and I didn't have any money on the Titans against the Vikings. Probably the worst officiated game I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I've never seen one team get royally screwed over as much as the Titans did. I'm talking touchdowns called back on illegal formations, a fourth down stop where there was the worst unnecessary roughness call I've ever seen on just like a shoulder to the chest. Uh, Asinine. That was the worst officiated game I've seen. Callahan was going ballistic on the sidelines the
Oh,
entire game.
I had the red zone on and they flipped in on that game. He went nuts.
Yeah,
I didn't know what I had it muted, so I didn't quite know what he was getting mad at.
I think that one that they showed was the fourth down stop when they called it unnecessary rough. It was one of the worst calls I've ever seen in my life. So they should have covered that game. Will Levis is playing better since he returned to the lineup. he was also asked, like, have you seen any improvement since returning from injury? He said, yeah, I haven't thrown the ball underhand or chest past it, so that's an improvement. So I kind of like that comment for a little self-deprecating humor. But he's around like 20th in adjusted EPA per play over the past 2 weeks, and he's played the Vikings and Chargers, two really good defenses. So, and 20th, it's not great, but when he's playing two really good defenses, and in the beginning of the year, he's one of the worst, right at the bottom. And over the past 2 weeks, Stroud is basically same adjusted EPA per play as Levis, and he got to play the Cowboys. This Texans offense, it's just broken right now. And I know they had the blowout win over Dallas. I think that had more to do with Dallas than Houston. They can't block in the interior at all. I mean, their left guard position in particular is just a turnstile. The kind of the head of the snake of their offense right now is Joe Mixon. And, they got Nico Collins back, which will help. He'll probably provide a couple explosive plays, but Titans do a really good job of limiting explosive plays. And the Titans' run D is really good. And the strength of that defense is in the interior of the defensive line.
Yeah.
So, you have Sweat and Simmons. They're going to cause chaos against this Texans offense. Stroud has not been great as a favorite, this Texans team. They get too conservative. The play calling isn't great. So I think this will be really low scoring. Like Levis is going to take sacks too. I mean, Levis is basically playing without a right tackle. The right tackle situation in Tennessee is as bad as I've ever seen any team. The Petit Frere is a bust. They try to put him in and they end up taking him out. They had this guy, Ernest, not Ernest Jones, but I forget his name. He was hurt. He's terrible.
I was about to be, that's a crazy ass position switch.
Yeah, last week they elevated the guy from the practice squad and put him in there. He was so bad. So I mean, Levis has taken 12 sacks over the past 2 games. He takes a lot of sacks. There's going to be a lot of negative plays in this game, not a lot of explosive. I think it's going to be lower scoring, which gives more value to the dog. And Titans defense, I think will keep them in this game. They're due to just get some breaks, like not have everything on special teams, not have everything go wrong with the refs. These are both two heavily penalized teams, so maybe that washes out. And I just think this is too many points for a divisional game. I took the Titans. It's scary though. But yeah, so you rarely see this. NFL's so efficient. You rarely see a team 1-9 against the spread.
Well, I was texting with all lines here provided by DraftKings. One of my good buddies out in Arizona actually works for them, and he's like, he takes care of some of their whales and VIP clients, and he was like, yeah, we've had, it's been a crazy year, right? Because there have been some of these moments. It's why, like, as a bettor, the first thing I do when I'm getting ready to talk to you, or just kind of look at the board even earlier in the week, is who the Jets playing. And obviously they're not playing this week, so that's disappointing. But I think piggybacking off that, we talked about last week, going all in on the Colts, and it's one of the biggest bets I've made this season. And I got to be honest with you, when it was 24-16 and Anthony Richardson had this bad fumble on a delayed blitz, I was getting nervous. Now the cream rises, and we were proven right over time. But one thing I've learned from you over the years is those teams that score like an enormous point total the next week against the spread. And the Lions have now done this twice, right? I mean, how many teams in NFL history, or at least modern day NFL history, have scored 52 points twice in a season, let alone basically twice in a month? I mean, it's pretty unheard of. I don't give a shit who you're playing. And obviously they did it to two of the worst teams in the league. That's insane. But I do think getting an enormous dog at home, some momentum. Listen, I was as critical and as out on Anthony Richardson as anyone, but reading some of the quotes, and I have a buddy who's, works for a team now, but he's been a part of a team that won, I think he's got like 3 or 4 rings. And he was like, when the Anthony Richardson stuff happened, he's like, I'll defend him a little bit. He's like, if this was, Joel Embiid showing up late, it's like, bro, you're 30 years old. It's like, this guy's 22. He's barely played. He's like, it's not as crazy as I think people are making it out to be. He's not doing this of like, because he's a slap or it's malicious. Like, I don't even think he knows what he doesn't know. And then everything that's happened these 2 weeks, what's come out of like, maybe it was an enormous wake-up call for him. And he had 2 of the best drives, Stuckey, I think, in his football playing career. Not just like this year. I'm talking ever, because he hasn't played that much. So they got a little momentum. They got a little life. Also, you just historically just short teams like the Lions. I don't know if they're going to lose this game, but getting over a touchdown, coming off that win, they got another big injury. I do defend Dan Campbell. Like, this is not the NBA or even baseball where you only have so many guys dressed on game day. I can't just take all five of my offensive linemen. You only have six wide receivers and a couple, two or three running backs. It's not as easy as like, why are your starters still in there? This isn't college. We don't have 85 guys in pads on the sideline. There's really only so much you can do, right? So it's kind of a tough spot. And he's like, I'm not critical of him at all on that, but he has lost some players in these games where it's in a preseason game, they'd all be on the sideline, but you don't have the numbers. So that's a long-winded way of saying I'm taking the Colts plus 7.5. You got to ride the hot hand.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm hoping that Bernard Raymond, their left tackle, plays. Otherwise, you have three rookie offensive linemen in there again, which isn't ideal. But at least it's their second game playing together, which is important for continuity. But yeah, this Lions defense, it has injuries. They also haven't really been tested. Like if you look at who they've played, like it's Mac Jones, it's Jordan Love, who was banged up with his groin injury. When they played the Seahawks, they were so hurt. The Cowboys, when they were so hurt. So I think this defense is a bit more vulnerable than their numbers would indicate. You go back to like that Minnesota game. Minnesota was able to move the ball at will against them, and then you have these injuries. And I was really impressed with Richardson last week. It was his best game by a country mile throwing the ball. So I think they can have some success here on the ground against the Lions front seven that has been hit hard by injuries, and I think they can have some success through the air. And Lions play a ton of cover one. I think that's a defense that Richardson's going to have success against with his legs and his arm hitting some explosive plays downfield. And the Colts defense is healthy. They've been playing like a slightly above average unit when they're fully healthy. And what did they do? They play less man coverage than any team in the NFL. We know what you're going to get with the Colts. Jared Goff this year against man coverage has been an absolute menace. He's like a 145 quarterback rating, like I think 11 touchdowns, no interceptions. Against zone, he has more interceptions than touchdowns, like an 89 rating. You want to zone this Lions offense. Their offense is going to be tremendous regardless, but that's the Colts play the ideal scheme
Do
to
you
kind
think
of
that's
slow them
because
down.
like it's just really hard to cover? St. Brown's an excellent receiver. Laporta gets open. Jameson's so fast. They just
Yeah.
create separation. I mean, is that your
And
take
and
on
it's
that?
just
Like
such a
why?
well schemed offense that yeah, it's just you're not going to be able to stick with their receivers and
Yeah.
all of their rubs, and you're just going to get lost. So you have to play zone. It's the only shot you have. So that helps a bit. And yeah, they're coming off a win. They're coming off a 52-10 win. Generally speaking, and you mentioned how rare is that? It's pretty rare for teams to score 50 twice. They scored 52 twice in back-to-back home games. That's only been done three other times in NFL history. Pack, I think the Packers in the 50s, the Cowboys in the 60s, and 2014 Packers, the only teams to do that. But teams that win by 35 or more points the next week, they're usually overinflated. Like I don't think this line should be over a touchdown, and I think that's part of the reason why we're getting it. And the Lions have obviously been a wagon against the spread, but teams following a win by 35 or more points, historically around like 39-40% against the spread. When favored by four or more, around 36%. So it's been a good bet to go against those teams. So yeah, I think this is too many points. It's also not the best spot just on paper. So if there was ever a spot where the Lions might come out a bit flat, it would be this one. They just put up 52. They're rolling. Now you're going on the road for a non-conference game, and you have a divisional opponent on deck for Thanksgiving on a short week. Probably put some time into preparing for that this week. And the Colts, meanwhile, in full desperation mode,
That the
need
bear
this
they play
game.
is it the Bears on Thanksgiving? Is that who they play?
Yeah. Uh, Thanksgiving slate. It's the afternoon slate is
Pretty shooty.
awful. Uh, Especially if the Bears lose to the Vikings this week, and then but yeah, the Cooper Rush versus Danny DeVito. Danny DeVito.
Well, because
Um,
remember we liked them after they scored 52 against the Jags, but looking back, like that Packer game outside and hearing Dan after that was a big proving ground for them because his whole thing was like we wanted to prove to everyone that fucking bring on the rain, the snow, the sleet, the wind. Like, we're not a dome team. That was a and divisional opponent. I mean, let's face it, the team, they chase in that division. I know Minnesota has a better record, but you hold yourself up against the Packers if you're the Lions, not the Vikings. So that was like, I would say their biggest game of the year, right?
Yeah, but also
On the road at
Love was
Lambeau.
not healthy. I would have
Yeah.
told Love he wasn't up. He threw a pick six at the end of the first half. The Lions were outgained by like 200 yards. I mean, they deserved to win that game, but it wasn't like some juggernaut performance. This is still a team that scored what? And I think they've always been under Aaron Glenn. They're vulnerable to running quarterbacks. So I think that's important here with the way they rush the passer. And I think Richards could have some success with his legs. So yeah, I think that it's just too many points. I know the lines are tough to fade, but I think this is a good spot, good number, and good matchup on both sides of the ball for various reasons. So, yeah, as long as Richardson doesn't make too many mistakes, I think the Colts will stay within summer. And by the way, all Shane Steichen does is play close games.
Yeah.
Every one of their games is
Good team, bad team, doesn't matter.
it's just a one possession game, which obviously is important if you're catching 7.5.
I would say if we just circled 15, 20 of the top games of the season, this game, hell, it might have cracked the top 6 or 7. Niners at Green Bay. It's changed a little bit. I mean, I would say the Packers have been a roller coaster, partly because of Love's health. And the Niners, for all the teams that we thought were going to be awesome, I would say have had one of the more disappointing seasons. They're 5-5, but it feels like they're 2-8. And I saw Bosa say yesterday, we're just really just a couple plays away from being 8-2. And he's not wrong, but it's like, yeah, I mean, part of you deserve to be 5-5 because the games you're blowing, and part of it's just health. Kittle all of a sudden, the 49ers, because they're an older team, they have guys on the injury report. I don't pay that much attention to it. It's like, oh, this guy's gonna play, this guy's gonna play, this guy's gonna play, unless it's something serious like McCaffrey throughout the season. But like all of a sudden, Kittle just on Saturday night, Schefter tweets he's not playing. Like, that's a pretty big deal. And that was my guy David Lombardi, who covers the team, said that their average separation per route last game was like well under 3 yards. It was by far the smallest in the league. I mean, Jawan Jennings is their best receiver right now. It's not like he's fast, doesn't get open. Debo cannot get away from anyone. If Kittle's gone, it really limits their passing game. But like I looked yesterday, the line was 2.5. Today, the line this morning on DraftKings was the Niners plus 1.5. This is I mean, they play at Green Bay, at Buffalo. Obviously, you lose both. Your season, they're just done. They're not going to win the division. They're not going to make the playoffs. If you go 1-1 in these two games, you're 6-6. Maybe you go on a run, get to 10-7. But like, you got to win one of these two games. And to me, this is their best chance. They have a better chance to win this game than they do at Buffalo. Just that they've played Green Bay very, very well for a long period of time. And it's not like Jordan Love is exactly, Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers in his prime right now. But I have a hard time, man. I got burned a couple weeks ago, Tampa. Last week, Seattle, I just wasn't going to touch. I'm like, yeah, the Niners should win this game by 10 plus. They own Geno, but fuck this. And then they lose the game. I don't know, man. I want to take the 49ers, but they've really given me trust issues, Stuckey. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean they are close. They're I agree with that sentiment that they
Bosa
are a couple
Bosa might
plays.
be out, which would be a problem.
Yeah, Bosa would be a big blow. That's Seattle's most successful offensive drives are when he had to go to the sideline and their pressure rates went way down. This game, it's tough for me to crack. I mean, with all the injury uncertainty with San Francisco, and Bosa's a big piece of that, but Kittle also, even Trent Williams dealing with an injury.
Sounds like
I
Kittle's
mean,
going to play the way Kyle talked about Bosa and Trent. A little more worry. I would guess Trent plays. I think Bosa's definitely in question. I mean, he was in a lot of pain.
yeah. What about Purdy? I mean, he also has like a little shoulder. I mean, he's going to play, but so they're just beat up. I think it's a good spot for them. I mean, look, they are so close to being 8-2. Like you lose a kicker against Arizona, you blow a 10-point lead. You blow the 10-point lead, and part of it's their own fault with special teams. Like the Rams, part of that was special teams. The Cardinals was special teams. Now that's out of your control. You lose your kicker, but you blow this game against Seattle. I mean, I could go on and on about how close this team has been. On top of that, you've had the injuries. Like go to the Chiefs game, you lose all of your weapons at once. And then also the red zone. This is a team historically that's been dominant. Like last year, they were number one in the NFL in the red zone. This year, they're one of the worst. I would think that's a high variance stat over short sample size. I would think that stabilizes. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go on a run here in the red zone, like especially with McCaffrey back. And it's a team that can run and pass. Like they should be good in the red zone. So yeah, they've just had a lot of things go against them, and some of it is just their own fault. So I think that this is
I saw a picture of Lambeau today, and it was snowing. So I don't know if that benefits. Historically, it would benefit the Niners because they just want to ground pound and play defense. But I don't know now.
yeah, I think I don't know. I don't think it would be a huge advantage for either team here. Yeah, so I lean 49ers on the spot. They do a good job of taking away explosive plays, which you need to do against Green Bay. An interesting nugget here, but I probably can't get, I'm probably not going to get involved. An interesting nugget with, and by the way, the Packers have been the opposite of the 49ers. I mean, they've been pretty fortunate. And I mean, you look at they just beat the Bears on a blocked field goal.
They did
They
not
beat the
play well
Jags
last
by
week.
three.
Would you agree with
The te
that last week? They did not like last week was not a good performance for them. They should have lost that game.
No, Love has been off. I don't like. I know he's been dealing with some stuff, but they beat the Jags by three, the Texans by two. So their last three wins have come by a combined 6 points. Um, and so they've been a bit fortunate. So these like records could easily be flipped, but the injury uncertainty for the 49ers makes it a pass for me as of now. An interesting nugget that might go unnoticed by some is the Matt LaFleur, who I think is a really good coach. He hired Robert Saleh a couple weeks ago as an offensive assistant or an advisor. So I'm sure part of that had to do with this game on his mind. So yeah, Saleh is part of the Packers staff. Obviously, a lot of familiarity there
Decent
with the
chance though.
49ers.
Saleh hasn't watched much film this week. He's him and Douglas around a bender somewhere at a bar for the last 3 days.
That's probably true. So yeah, if I had to bet it, I'd probably bet the 49ers. But as of now, it's a pass. Like I need more clarity on the injury situation. And why bet on good teams when I've already said I bet on the Titans, the Colts, and I also bet on I called him Danny DeVito. I bet on Tommy DeVito, who's awful, but so is Daniel Jones. Bucks aren't healthy, laying 6 in New York. I can't get there. And Tristan Wirfs, I think, is going to miss one of the best tackles in football. Baker Mayfield under pressure, not as good. The Giants' defensive line can dominate this game. That's their biggest strength. And without Wirfs, it's a very vulnerable offensive line. So reluctantly, I also played the Giants, but that's a hold your nose special.
I'd say one game, and we mentioned this last week, taking Vegas at Miami. The 7 points just was screaming at you to take Vegas, but it was like under no circumstances, kind of like the Titans. I just can't bet on Vegas. Seems crazy. Denver on the road. That'll probably be like a Bronco home game, and the Broncos up until this year, somehow Vegas has kind of owned them for like the last 5 or 6 years. But if you're just shorting Vegas, who actually looked a little bit better offensively, with Norv and his pops, but I could just it's this I think the same thing about Vegas as the Cowboys and the Jets. Like I just cannot be shocked when I look up and they're down 15, 20 points or definitely double, 10 plus in the fourth quarter because it happens every time. Like Cowboys playing Washington. Obviously Washington's not playing as well. They've lost some games. Jaden's been, I would say come back to earth. But it's like I just kind of expect the Cowboys to lose by 20. I kind of expect the same thing with Vegas. Like expect them to lose by multiple touchdowns. Now, both I think those two games fall into the same category of like divisional games could get weird. You just never know. But I think at minimum one of these two teams, not only doesn't cover, but just kind of gets rolled. Where it's like Chicago, Minnesota, like the plus 3.5 with the Bears jumps out to me. Like kind of like the Bears in that spot, even though I don't really like the Bears. But in these other two situations, like I truly believe the Cowboys in Vegas are right there with, the Titans and I guess whoever else really sucks. I guess we'll find out next week when the Giants play the Cowboys of like these teams are competing for the number one overall pick. We have teams competing for the playoffs, and then we have teams like truly competing for the number one pick. And if you're a sicko gambler, this is why you watch them play.
Yeah, I got to find a way to have some money on that Cowboys-Giants game in order to make that watchable on
If you were a
Thanksgiving.
betting man right now, who do you think ends up with the number one overall pick? Because they're all kind of bunched up at 2 and 3 wins. But the Cowboys have I mean, they have no life in sight. Like, do you plan on taking the Giants next week against the Cowboys?
I don't. I mean, the Cowboys. I'm not. Yeah, I don't. The Cowboys gonna be favored. Gonna be like a small favorite,
Is
I
that
would
game in
assume.
Dallas?
Yeah. Um,
I guess it's always in Dallas, huh?
Cowboys are at the Panthers a couple weeks. That might end up determining it.
But I feel like the Panthers have got another win or two in them, you know?
Yeah, I would agree. It could be the Cowboys. I mean, the Cowboys' most winnable games are at the Panthers, the Giants at home. That's pretty much it.
But is like
Yeah, the
Vegas
Cowboys.
Vegas winning? Is Vegas winning another game?
That's a good question.
I mean, they've still got Kansas City.
Yeah, they got Kansas City this Black Friday. Yeah, they need to probably beat the Broncos here.
Play the
They have the
Chargers
Jags at
again.
home. It actually might be the Jags if I had a bet. Um, the Jags are Texans at Titans, Jets at Raiders, Titans, Colts at Colts. Yeah,
Yeah, I
maybe the
guess the Vegas could win a
Raiders,
game or two.
Jags game might determine it. Yeah, in regards to Bears, don't mind the 3.5. Third straight road game for Minnesota. Bears a bit healthier on D and on the offensive line. Caleb Williams against the blitz and Flores does scare me a bit, but the offense looked better last week after the coordinator change. Just getting the ball out quick, which is going to be
Yeah.
useful this week. Look, Washington's a bad spot for Dallas. They have the game on Thanksgiving. They're coming off a short week going on the road. Washington played on Thursday night. They have extended rest. Give Daniels some time to get healthier. I think he was still dealing with that injury. And Dallas might have be down multiple of their, might be without a couple of their best offensive linemen. They just have nothing. Like it's Cooper Rush. Now, if you can't block, like how many times can you throw to CeeDee Lamb, who looks like he's over this season already? Their defense is terrible. They can't stop the run. They can't. Their corners are all hurt. They just have nothing. And I'm sure Dan Quinn wants to put up a number here. So yeah, I don't have any interest in
It's kind of listen, no
the.
one's gonna cry for the Cowboys. If you got to play on Thanksgiving, it's pretty fucked up to get a Monday night game leading into
And
basically
then going
whatever
on the
10 days
road.
away. That seems a little unfair. Like this is a pretty crazy stretch for the Cowboys Monday night on the road, then Thanksgiving. Like, what are we doing? No,
Yeah,
I
that
mean
happened to the
this isn't
Seahawks.
September. This is late November.
The Seahawks had to do that Monday night, came back home to Sunday, then had a short week against the 49ers. And we're all beat up and they obviously got rolled in that spot. And then the other one you mentioned, yeah, with Denver, I mean, I bet Denver last week against the Raiders against the Falcons because the Falcons couldn't get pressure and their secondary was all beat up. The Raiders can at least get pressure, but the problem is, and this line is getting a bit inflated. I mean, like if you look, the Broncos have been good. Bo Nix has been improving. Sean Payton's a great coach. Their defense is really good, but they've done most of their damage against the NFC South, kind of like the Falcons have. They're 4-0 against the NFC South. All those bad defenses that can't get pressure and have been hurt. So I think the Broncos are getting to like overinflated territory. The problem is the last week against the Dolphins, by the end of the game, the Raiders were down all three of their starting corners. Nate Hobbs didn't play. Ja'Cory Bennett got hurt. Jack Jones got hurt. They were down all three starting corners. None of them practiced yesterday. So again, they might be able to get a little bit more pressure than the Falcons, but if they don't have their three starting corners, it's not a great secondary. Raiders try to just really limit your explosive plays. That's problematic, and I probably can't back the Raiders in this spot. If they were fully healthy, I would look to potentially back them. All five straight losses, home divisional dog. Historically, it's a good spot, but both their running backs are hurt too. They have some offensive line injuries. They're just beat up. So yeah, I can't lay it with Denver at this price, but and I also just can't look at the Raiders because of the injury situation.
What about the Rams as a home dog?
Um, I'm kind of close to market there. That game is it's really interesting to me because I think the Rams offense is starting to ascend, right? They got healthier on the offensive line, getting some continuity there. And then obviously they got their receivers back. And over the past 2 years, we have enough data to show us that this Rams offense, when they have all their pieces healthy, is one of the best in the NFL. So they're kind of on this upward trajectory. And then I think that the Eagles defense is also on
Yeah,
an upward
it's playing well.
trajectory. Vic Fangio usually takes time for when he's at it with a new team. You know, people refer to it as the Fangio bump. It's a very complex defense. Like when does that switch go off? And it looks like it has for the Eagles. Now I know they haven't played the best of competition, and maybe Daniels was a bit banged up, but I go back to that game in Cincy. That's the one where I really saw it when they shut down that Bengals high-powered offense. A lot of it comes down to, the defense is getting used to the scheme, but both of their rookie corners are playing extremely well. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Mitchell in particular has been playing at an all-pro level against some of the best receivers in the NFL. So those rookie corners against the Rams receivers, I can't wait to watch that. I'm pretty close to where this is priced. Um, so nothing for me there, but it's probably it's a really important game for the Rams. You probably get against a good opponent. You and the Rams can get some pressure with their defense. That's what you need to do against Hurts. You probably get like a very good McVay game plan, play calling game. So yeah, if I could get three, it would be Rams or nothing.
I know this. The Eagles think they got that he doesn't, Sherman had great hands, and obviously Sherman was a different type player. Revis had pretty good hands too. This guy doesn't have good hands, but he's got a chance to be like an elite, like, the best corner in the league for a long time. I think we're going to
Agreed.
look back and go, wait, where they draft this guy like fourth overall? No, they got him in the 20s. They got him
Yep.
in and honestly, that's kind of like the Rams thing. It's like, what? Wait, did they draft Khalil Mack 2.0, number six? No, they got him at the end of the teens because all these fucking quarterbacks and the receivers pushed everyone down. It's like the
Yep.
Rams and the Eagles got. I'd feel pretty confident saying in 3 or 4 years, those two guys are going to be two of the better players from the first
Could be
round.
all pros. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, Jared Verse looks like Khalil Mack did when he was young. Power,
I think
still a
Verse
little
leads the league
raw.
in pressure rate.
Yeah,
It's
honestly,
insane.
he's better. He's better than Khalil Mack because Khalil Mack had to kind of learn how to like some pass rush moves. It was just all power, but like Khalil, it's like his power immediately like he's lifting guys up and driving them back, and that's like holy shit,
Pretty stunning that a guy like that was at
it's crazy.
University of Albany 3 years ago before Florida State got him in the portal.
Well, let's transition to, I if you would have told anyone 3 months ago that this would have been by far one of the more intriguing games of the year. And I bet when the numbers come out, it'll be one of especially if it's close, will be one of the highest rated college football games of the year, which, aka non NFL games, means it'll be one of the more higher rated non NFL sporting events of the year. I would expect if this game's good, 10 plus million people to watch. We're either going to look back and go, that's insane that Indiana was getting almost 2 touchdowns. I looked this morning, it was 13 points. Or it's like, God, Indiana's pretty overrated. You speak of the Albany thing. This guy has countless players from JMU that start for his team. And I didn't realize, but maybe we've talked about this before, is a lot of those players, when they were originally recruited from JMU, they were not even a D1 team. They were D1 AA. So this guy has turned these guys into now. When I was at Cal Poly, we were sending guys to the NFL in the third or fourth round. It's not like D1 AA players don't go to the NFL, but to make the transition like they've made, it's been pretty insane. I don't really have a feel for this. I guess just watching football long enough to know usually in these spots, like it wouldn't shock me if Ohio State wins like 40-15. But maybe Indiana's just really good. Maybe the Signetti guy, I thought he was a little like the money. Clearly, he must be cool with staying there because, like, what if Michigan fires their coach? I would imagine they would have came after him. Now, maybe NIL makes these jobs if Indiana has NIL money, then maybe it's just a good job. Like maybe it's better in Wisconsin or Nebraska. I don't know. I mean, it's we're in a changing landscape, but my gut tells me like I'd be a little stunned if Ohio State doesn't control this game, but maybe just Indiana's on one of those magical seasons.
Yeah, I normally in this spot I would be on Ohio State. And historically, when you look at ranked teams, high profile matchups, when there's a team that's a bigger favorite, it's usually for a reason. Bigger favorites have done well, double-digit favorites in this spot. But I actually played Indiana. Um, they're hard to gauge because they've played nobody. I mean, you look at the offenses they faced,
What's
their
their
strength
best
of
what's their
schedule.
best win?
Mm, Michigan, Washington. Now the thing is that with their schedule, you can adjust for opponent. They've done about as well as you could with their schedule. Like even the best teams in the country, what they would have done, like their margin, how dominant they've been. So I think that
Exactly. Like
they're
Nebraska, like you just go, that's not a great win. But I watched that game. They beat the living piss out of them. They treated them like, yeah, it's not going to be a great win, but we're going to win this thing 55-7.
yeah, a UCLA team that's been competitive in almost every game. Um, Now granted it was early in the year, but I mean Indiana went there and uh, just absolutely bludgeoned them. They won that game 42-13. So I think we have enough of a data set to say that they're pretty good. I mean, they put 41 up on Northwestern. Northwestern has a top 25 defense. 31 Washington has a really good defense, 56 on Nebraska, 47 on Michigan State. So yeah, I think that they're legit. They're well coached. They're coming off a bye. I like their coordinators. I think they'll have a really good scheme here.
Well, if they
And
win this game, they're essentially playing Oregon in the championship game, correct? I mean, I know
yeah,
they'd have
they
to
would
beat Purdue,
clinch.
but they would
Yep.
clinch. They'd be in.
Yep.
So there's
Yep.
a lot of, I mean, this is obviously an enormous game for several reasons for them.
Yeah. And yeah, so I played them. I'm gonna trust Signetti. I'm
I
gonna
kind of want to
trust
too. I
Rourke.
think I might join you.
And they're gonna play like Signetti for 2 weeks gonna play this disrespect card with the line and no one giving them a chance. And all the media is trashing their schedule. And their defensive line is really good. And they cause a lot of issues with like their stunts and they can get into the backfield, they can get a ton of pressure. Ohio, well, I think one of the keys to this game, and Ohio State's offense, they have great receivers, but it's just been underwhelming to me. And I go back to like the Nebraska game, they should have lost to Nebraska at home. When we talk about like comparing opponents, um, and their offensive line, they already lost their left tackle, was their best offensive lineman for the year. They had to make some adjustments. They adjusted. Well, this week at practice, their stud center tore his Achilles. Alabama transfer. He's out for the year. That's an enormous loss. Now you're probably going to move your guard to your center and then bring in this other kid who I don't think is very good at guard. You're, you're talking about reshuffling again your whole offensive line. Ohio State is one of the best rosters, if not the best in college football. One of the places they don't have depth coming into the year was their offensive line. And losing their left tackle and their center, probably two of the guys they
He
just
tore his
cannot
ACL
afford
at
to lose.
practice.
Achilles, yeah, tore his Achilles practice on Tuesday. We're recording this on Thursday. Yeah, Tuesday. Um,
I can't imagine. I didn't even see that. How do you practice after that moment? Because clearly, when an injury like the guy goes down and he has to get carted or carried off, that had to rattle the program, right?
yeah, and your offensive line's all about continuity. You're going up against a really good defensive line, and now you got to reshuffle your whole offensive line again. Ohio State also is a snail. Like it's very weird because Chip Kelly calls the offense. They are so slow. So like the possessions might be limited in this game. There might be some weather. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna trust Signetti playing the disrespect card. I'm gonna trust what I've seen with my eyes and also just the numbers when I'm adjusting for opponent that Indiana actually is legit. And we're just gonna see this in the new. There's also just no elite teams. I've said this over and over again. There's no elite teams that like just deserve that you are gonna roll the ball out there and blow teams out on a week in a weekend basis. And I think Indiana is a top 10-ish team. And it's not like Ohio State is head and shoulders above everybody else, like we've seen with a team or two each year. I don't think we have that this year. And now they're dealing with injuries along the offensive line. My one concern is with the Indiana offensive line. Their offensive line has been really, really good. Against Michigan in the second half, Michigan has one of the best defensive lines in college football. Michigan's defensive line really owned them. And Indiana lost its left guard for the year. and their offensive line have been playing really well, at a lot of continuity. Now they get a multi-year starter in there from JMU, but their left guard that went out, I think, allowed only 3 pressures all year, and this happened. At least this happened like 2 weeks ago, and in their last game against Michigan, he allowed 4 pressures just in the game alone. So is that the weak link of the offensive line? And does the offensive line just crumble on the road? Maybe, but I think Indiana, Rourke, they have good weapons. Their offensive line has played really well all year. They're well coached, and I think their defensive line is going to cause some problems for this. And I don't think Ohio State's going to be able to run it with their offensive line issues. That's what hurt them against Nebraska. They had their tackle got hurt. They had a shuffle. They were trying to figure out their offensive line rotation, and they couldn't run it against Nebraska. I think that's going to happen here again. And then Indiana's going to be able to get pressure on Will Howard, and Will Howard is not great under pressure. So, yeah, I think the sharp side, the quote unquote sharp side, would be Ohio State. I'm going to disagree with it here. I'm rolling with the Hoosiers.
I do think too, and I get it. The Big Ten just in general is down. But if you remove the Michigan game, I mean, really their only close game of the season, and you just look at their road games against Big Ten opponents, UCLA 42-13, Northwestern 41-24, Michigan State 47-10. I mean, they're going on the road and they are destroying these teams.
Yep.
So and obviously even their home games like 56-7, 31-17, 42-28. I mean, they're blowing out all these Big Ten teams. Just destroying. So it's like we have had years. Yeah, I mean, they might not be a true national championship contender, but I think
but staying within 2 touchdowns, that's a different ask. Like
yeah,
you can they can do that here.
Is it crazy to think? Obviously, Ohio State, no one would choose Indiana's roster over Ohio State, but like, I think when we look back, we talked about that Notre Dame Navy game, and it was clear it was just like outmatched. Like, what I'm interested, do you just I think you'll kind of know it within the first quarter. Do their athletes look way slower compared how they've usually looked against these other teams, or it's like, oh,
Yep.
it's not that big of a difference? Because I think the frustrating thing for Nebraska is obviously Riola's played like shit, but like you watched them in that game against Ohio State, and it was like they don't look that much different. Like Nebraska's had some moments this year where you're like, damn, they got a lot of good athletes. They're physical, like the Colorado game, the Ohio State game. Like I would understand being a fan and being frustrated, and I'm just fascinated. Like, has Indiana, like, what are they going to look like on the field against like their DBs who have made plays whenever I've watched them against, Jeremiah Smith? Or is the guy going to look like me out there? Or is he going to be like, oh, they're just running stride for stride? I don't know. That's like, I'm tempted to even sprinkle a little bit on the money line, if you know what I'm saying, because maybe,
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't disagree with that because there's a lot of variance in like how good really is Indiana. I think it's safe to say that they're really good, but how good are they? There's still some uncertainty there because of the schedule. This game kind of reminds me a bit about, like you have these teams that they just it's just their year. And like I go back to 2 years ago, I think on the same weekend, Michigan, well, no, Michigan would have been the weekend after, but Michigan was catching like 10 against Ohio State, and no one believed in that Michigan team, and then Michigan won by like 22 at Ohio State. And then TCU, who ended up going to the national title, they beat Michigan en route. No one believed in them at Texas. They were like an 8-point dog at Texas, and Texas was like 6-3, and they were undefeated.
yeah.
And TCU went to Texas and won outright. Um, and Texas and Ohio State were both like the quote unquote sharp sides of that game. I think there's something to this Indiana season. I'm going to trust Signetti. But yeah, you should know. You'll know right away. Also, like in the trenches. That's my biggest concern. Like the Indiana offensive line. That's what I'm going to be watching early.
Okay, Stuckey, I'm going to join you then on the Indiana train. I need a little juice for the old big noon kickoff that Ohio State fans sure
That's another
love.
thing that doesn't help them. They keep getting this noon slate because of Fox. So I think that they would rather play this game at night.
Hell yeah, they would much rather
So
be a 6:30 kickoff or whatever.
yeah. So I think that helps Indiana a bit.
Okay, Stuckey, have fun watching Indiana cover, and I'll be right there with you. And let's buckle up and enjoy your Titans. See if they can change the narrative of their old 1-9 season. I will talk to you next week.
Thanks, brother. I won't enjoy it, but hopefully they get to the window. See you
Okay,
next
talk
week.
to you
Cheers.
soon, buddy. See you.